It started with a joke. That's what he always said when someone called him out. Relax, it's just a joke. But there was something about the way Mason said things that made me wonder if he even knew where the joke ended and something else began. We worked together at a marketing firm in downtown Chicago. Open office layout, cold brew on tap, fake startup culture, even though the company was 15 years old. I hated it at first, but it paid well, and the people weren't half bad. Mason, especially. He was one of those guys who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they belonged. Quick with a laugh, sharp-witted, disarmingly charming. He was straight, obviously. He talked about girls a lot, had Tinder dates every other week, and wore tight button-downs that screamed, frat boy turned adult. The kind of guy who had definitely peaked in college but carried it well enough that no one minded. We shared a cubicle wall, which meant I heard all his dumb jokes, all his ridiculous flirting, all the phone calls with girls he didn't really like. I rolled my eyes more often than I laughed, but truth was, I liked him, against my better judgment. He started calling me handsome sometime around week 3. It was a running gag, he claimed, every time I walked into the room. Damn, Ethan, looking good today. Or when I wore a button-up instead of my usual hoodie. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were trying to impress me. At first, I laughed it off. Because that's what you do when the straight guy flirts with you for fun, right? You play along, you keep it safe, you don't look too long or respond too sincerely, because he'll laugh and say you're too sensitive and walk away. Except Mason never walked away. The flirting kept happening. In meetings, in hallways, at the bar after work. Sometimes he'd sit too close, his knee brushing mine. Once, during a brainstorming session, he reached over and adjusted my collar, saying it looked too straight. Whatever that meant. I told myself he didn't mean anything by it, that he was just being Mason. But then came the night of the client party. It was one of those mandatory events, open bar, tiny appetizers on toothpicks. Way too many people pretending to care about sales metrics. I showed up late, planning to put in an hour and sneak out. But Mason spotted me the second I walked in. He looked good, annoyingly good. Black dress shirt rolled at the sleeves, tie loose around his neck. I could smell his cologne before he even got close. There he is, he grinned, handing me a drink without asking. Was starting to think you ditched me. We're not a package deal, I said, taking the drink anyway. Sure we are, he said, like it was obvious. Who else is gonna keep me from flirting with HR again? We ended up on the rooftop terrace after an hour, leaning against the railing, the city buzzing below us. The party noise faded into background hum. Mason took a sip of his drink, then looked over at me, eyes glinting in the low light. You ever wonder what people think when they see us? He asked. I raised an eyebrow. Like, coworkers? Friends? Nah, he said, stepping a little closer. Like, if they think there's something going on. My heart gave a nervous little jolt. I shrugged. I don't know. I guess people assume things all the time. He nodded slowly. What would you say if I told you I didn't mind it? I turned to look at him. He was serious. No smirk. No playful lilt in his voice. I'd say you're drunk, I said, not trusting the moment. He chuckled, but his gaze didn't move. Not that drunk. We stood there in silence for a beat too long. The air between us buzzed with something I didn't want to name. Then he reached over, slowly, deliberately, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I flinched, not because I didn't want it, but because I did. Still just a joke? I asked, my voice low. Mason didn't answer. He just stared at me like he was waiting for permission. He didn't move. His hand hovered near my face for just a second longer than necessary, then dropped. But he stayed close. Closer than any straight guy should be during a quiet rooftop moment with another man. I didn't know what to say. My brain was running through every possible explanation. He was drunk, he was messing with me, he was experimenting, he didn't know what he was doing. And then he broke the silence. I'd think about it, he said quietly, eyes still locked on mine. Think about what? You, us, I don't know. what it'd be like. That knocked the breath out of me. I searched his face for the smirk, the punchline, the teasing glint that always followed his jokes. But there was none. Just Mason, standing there in the dim light, completely unreadable. "Mason," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "don't fuck with me." "I'm not," he said immediately. "I know I joke around a lot, but this isn't a bit, not tonight." My heart was hammering. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I leaned back against the railing, needing the stability, needing something to keep me grounded. "You're straight," I said. It sounded weak, even to me. "Yeah," he said, then paused. "I thought I was, still might be. I don't know. I've never done anything with a guy before. And now you're telling me this?" He looked down at the drink in his hand, then tossed it back in one swallow. "I don't know why tonight. I just couldn't keep pretending I don't feel something when I'm around you. I didn't say anything. I couldn't." My mind was spinning. Every defense mechanism I'd spent years building was trying to kick in. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I don't expect you to say anything or do anything. I just needed you to know." He turned then, heading for the door like he couldn't get away fast enough. And maybe he couldn't. Maybe he thought he'd ruined everything with those few words. "Mason?" I called out, just as his hand hit the doorknob. He stopped but didn't turn around. I walked over, standing behind him. Not touching. Just there. "I've thought about it too," I said. That made him turn. He looked at me like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Like he'd expected rejection, distance, a joke in return. "Not this. But I don't play games," I added. "And I won't be some experiment you forget about tomorrow." "I'm not asking you to be," he said, softer now. "Then what are you asking?" He looked at me for a long time. And then, with a voice that was almost too quiet to hear, he said, "Just one night. Just to see." There it was. The ask. And it wrecked me. Because I had spent months pretending I didn't want exactly that. And now it was being offered by the one guy the first never expected to offer it. But I wasn't going to say yes. Not yet. "Let's get out of here," I said instead. "You can crash at my place. We'll talk." Mason's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Okay." The Uber ride was quiet. Mason sat next to me in the backseat, his hands clasped in his lap, staring out the window like he was trying to memorize the route. I didn't say much either. I was too busy trying to manage the chaos in my chest. Too many thoughts, too many questions, and none of them had answers. He was the one who broke the silence when we stepped into my apartment. "This is nice," he said, voice a little too loud for 2 a.m., like he was trying to fill the space with something other than the tension between us. "It's a rental," I replied, kicking off my shoes. "It's only nice because I keep it clean." Mason smiled faintly, toeing off his sneakers near the door. He followed me into the living room and stood there awkwardly, like he didn't know what to do with himself. I handed him a glass of water. "You're not drunk," I said. It wasn't a question. "No," he said, taking the glass. "Just nervous." "Why?" He hesitated, then looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Because I've never done this before. Said this before. To anyone." I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. "So what changed?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe it's been building. Maybe it's always been there, and I didn't know what to call it." "And what is it now?" Mason took a slow sip of water, then set the glass down and looked at me again. "It's you," he said. "That's what I know." I wanted to believe him, but I also knew what it meant to be someone's first. It wasn't always romantic. Sometimes it was messy, sometimes confusing, sometimes hurtful. "You're not gay," I said quietly. "I don't think I am," he admitted. "But I'm not straight when I'm around you." I looked away. Tried to smile, failed. Mason, I said. You don't get to try this out and walk away when it gets complicated. If this is just curiosity, I need to know now. I'm not trying to figure myself out at your expense, he said. I swear, Ethan. I want to be close to you. I want to know what it feels like to stop pretending I don't think about it. He stepped closer then, slow, like he was giving me a chance to stop him. I didn't move. I won't do anything unless you want me to, he said. My voice was a whisper when I answered. I don't want to maybe. You don't have to take care of me, he said. Not tonight. Just let me be here. With you. I nodded. We sat on the edge of the bed later, the silence, thick, but not heavy. Mason was still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled, top button undone. I handed him a blanket, but he didn't take it. I'm not cold, he said. Unless you want space. I didn't. God help me, I didn't. So we lay down. Not touching, not talking, just breathing in the same quiet room, shoulder to shoulder. It was stupid how intimate it felt. And then, after what felt like hours, he reached over and took my hand. No joke, no smirk, just his fingers wrapped gently around mine, and the slow, steady squeeze that said, I'm still here. I didn't fall asleep right away. Mason's hand stayed in mine, warm and still, like he was afraid I'd pull away if he moved. Maybe I was afraid I'd do the same. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart doing slow somersaults in my chest. I wasn't used to this version of him. Quiet, tentative, unsure. It didn't match the Mason I knew from the office, the one who made everyone laugh, who teased me until I rolled my eyes, who never let a silence last longer than a few seconds. This Mason didn't need the room to see him. He just needed me to stay. You awake? He whispered. Yeah. He didn't speak again right away. I thought maybe he'd fallen asleep, but then I felt his thumb brush the back of my hand. A slow, small movement that wrecked me more than any kiss could have. I used to wonder, he said finally, what you'd do if I pushed it too far. You mean if I called you on the flirting, I asked? He gave a soft laugh, barely audible. Yeah. I always waited for you to say something. To make me stop. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. He was quiet again, but his grip on my hand tightened just a bit. I wasn't uncomfortable, he said. I was scared. That made me turn toward him. Our faces were inches apart in the dark. Of what? He swallowed. I could see his jaw tense in the low light. That it wasn't just a joke. That I actually meant it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My chest was too full of everything I'd spent the last year trying to bury. You didn't deserve to be someone's experiment, he added, voice hoarse. And yet here you are, I said. He winced. I know. There was a beat of silence, the kind that stretches until it feels like it'll break. You want to know what I was scared of? I asked. He turned to face me more fully, our hands still tangled between us. That if I ever let myself believe you wanted me and I was wrong, I wouldn't be able to come back from it. He exhaled, shaky and slow. I'm not going to leave you hanging, he said. Not after this. Then don't say it unless you mean it. He leaned in, not all the way, not yet, but enough that I could feel his breath on my lips. I mean it. And this time, when he kissed me, it wasn't like a joke or a dare or a test. It was slow and tentative and unsure in a way that felt incredibly honest. His hand came up to my cheek, not practiced or perfect, just there. And when we finally pulled apart, he kept his forehead against mine, breathing hard. I don't know what this makes me, he said quietly. Human, I said. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sigh, and lay back down, pulling me with him. Can I stay? He asked. You already are, I whispered. We fell asleep like that. His arm draped across my chest, our fingers still locked, our breaths finding the same rhythm. And for the first time in months, I didn't dream of anything else. Morning light poured in through the blinds too early, hitting me square in the eyes. I squinted, groaned quietly, and instinctively rolled away from it, only to realize I wasn't alone in the bed. Mason was still asleep, his arm draped over my waist like it belonged there. His face was relaxed, his breathing steady. For a moment, I just watched him. The lines in his forehead that were always there when he was awake had vanished. He looked peaceful, and then, slowly, his eyes fluttered open. We stared at each other for a second before either of us said anything. "Morning," he said, voice low and gravelly from sleep. "Hey." He didn't move. Neither did I. Did we? He trailed off. "No," I said quickly. "We didn't do anything. We just slept." He nodded, eyes searching mine like he needed to hear that again. Okay. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, but thick with all the things we hadn't said yet. "I didn't dream that kiss, did I?" he asked eventually, a small smirk tugging at one corner of his mouth. "Nope." "Good," he said, "because I've been replaying it since I woke up." That made me laugh. Just a small one, but real. "Same." Mason propped himself up on one elbow, his expression shifting into something more serious. "So now what?" "That was the question, wasn't it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I wasn't expecting you to show up last night and say all that." "I don't have a plan." Mason nodded slowly, processing that. "I didn't mean to dump it all on you. I needed to get it out. I've been feeling like I'm living in a box I built myself, and I couldn't breathe in it anymore." I sat up, letting the blanket fall around my waist. "So, is this you coming out?" He winced. "I don't know if I can say that yet. I just know I've never wanted to be close to someone the way I wanted to be with you." "And last night wasn't just curiosity?" "No," he said firmly. "It wasn't a phase. Or some dare. It was me being honest for once." I nodded, heart pounding. It was weird. How something I wanted for so long suddenly felt so fragile now that I had it in front of me. "I'm not expecting you to commit to anything," I said. "But if this is something you want to keep exploring, I'm here." Mason reached out, brushing his fingers against mine on the blanket. "I want to try, for real. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know it starts with you." I could have kissed him right then. But instead, I just squeezed his hand. "That's enough for now." We got up eventually, made coffee, ate cereal in silence, sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch. He made a dumb joke about my mismatched socks, and I called him an idiot for putting oat milk in his coffee. It was normal, easy, except it wasn't just friendship anymore. We didn't talk about it at work that week. We acted normal. No touches, no looks that lasted too long. But every now and then, I'd catch him watching me from across the room. And this time, he didn't look away. And a few nights later, I found him outside my apartment again. It was Thursday night when he showed up again. I'd just finished cleaning up from dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and a glass of wine. And I was halfway through loading the dishwasher when my phone buzzed. "Mason, you home?" I hadn't expected to hear from him tonight. We'd texted here and there since the weekend, mostly casual stuff, nothing deep. I didn't want to crowd him, and I figured he needed space to sort his head out, but 2 minutes later, he was standing at my door. He looked tired. Not bad tired, more like emotionally wrung out. His dress shirt was untucked, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and his tie hung loose around his neck. "I needed to see you," he said. That was all. I stepped aside, let him in, and closed the door behind him. He didn't move far, just stood in the entryway, watching me like he was waiting for permission. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, just couldn't stop thinking." "About?" He stepped closer. "You. That night. Us." I tried to stay still, keep calm, but my heart was racing, my palms a little sweaty. "I've been going in circles," he admitted, "trying to figure out what I want. And I think I know now." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "And?" "I want this," he said. "I want you." I didn't speak right away. I needed to hear it again. I'm not saying I've got everything figured out, he continued, but I don't want to play games. I don't want to confuse you or myself, but when I'm around you, things make sense in a way they don't with anyone else. He stepped even closer, now barely a foot away. And the last few nights, sleeping alone, thinking about that kiss, it made me realize I don't want that to be a one-time thing. I studied him. He looked nervous, sincere, and incredibly unsure, in a way I hadn't seen since our first night together. "You still scared?" I asked gently. "Yeah," he said, "but I'm more scared of not doing this, of pretending it never happened." That was enough for me. I reached up, gently cupped the side of his face. He leaned into it instinctively, like he'd been waiting for the touch. His eyes fluttered closed, and when they opened again, they were softer. Then he kissed me. Slower than the first time. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just us, breathing each other in, learning the new rhythm we were building together. When we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I've never felt this safe," he whispered. And that did me in. We didn't rush anything. We just sat on the couch afterward, tangled under a blanket, watching some old movie we'd both seen 100 times. His arm was around me, mine across his chest. Every so often, he'd turn his head and press a kiss to my temple or the edge of my jaw. No words, just quiet affirmations that he was still here, that this was real. That weekend, something shifted. We didn't have a talk about labels. There was no "so what are we" moment, just a quiet understanding that what we were doing mattered, and neither of us was pretending anymore. Mason stayed over Friday night, again Saturday. By Sunday morning, his toothbrush was next to mine. We didn't talk about it. Sunday afternoon, we lay on the floor, half asleep, sun pouring in through the window. A record spun softly in the background, and Mason traced slow circles on my forearm with his fingertip. "I told my sister about you," he said suddenly. I looked over at him. "Yeah?" He nodded. "She asked what changed. I said I stopped pretending I wasn't in love with my best friend." My chest tightened. "You said love?" He smiled, soft but sure. "Yeah. And are you?" Mason rolled toward me, leaning on one elbow. "I don't know what else to call it, Ethan. I wake up and think about you. I go to sleep thinking about you. You make me feel like I can breathe again." I swallowed hard. "I love you too," I said. I didn't even have to think about it. It was already there, had been for a while. He leaned down and kissed me, a slow, unhurried press of lips that told me we were exactly where we needed to be. No games, no confusion, just us. At work, nothing changed on the surface. We were still Mason and Ethan. Coworkers, teammates, the guys who bickered over font choices and brainstormed over coffee. But beneath that, everything was different. Sometimes our knees would bump under the table during a meeting and neither of us would move away. Sometimes he'd shoot me a look across the office that made my face heat up. And when we left at the end of the day, it was together. Eventually, people noticed. One day, our friend Katie from HR cornered me in the break room. "You and Mason," she said, leaning against the counter. "Something's up." I froze. "What do you mean?" She smiled knowingly. "You used to roll your eyes when he flirted with you. Now you smile." I couldn't help it. I smiled again. "Yeah, it's real," Katie nodded. "Good. He's better with you. Less of a dumbass." I laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. But it stuck with me that people could see it, that it wasn't just in my head anymore. That night, lying in bed, I asked Mason, "Do you think we're gonna last?" He turned to face me, brushing his thumb over my cheek. I didn't plan on this, but I've never felt more certain about anything. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he wasn't the guy the first thought he was when we met. He wasn't just the funny, flirty straight guy from work anymore. He was mine, and I was his. 6 months later, we moved in together. It wasn't some grand romantic gesture. It happened the way most real things do. Slowly, then all at once. His lease was ending. Mine still had a few months. We were already spending nearly every night together, sharing a dresser drawer, cooking breakfast like it was second nature. "Why are we paying 2 rents?" Mason asked one night, toothbrush in hand, towel slung low on his hips. "Feels dumb." I looked at him from where I sat on the bed. "Is this your version of a proposal?" He grinned. "Maybe, unless you're about to say no." "Try again," I said. So the next night, he came home with a pizza box. Inside was the usual greasy, delicious mess. But on top, tucked under the lid, was a post-it note. "Let's make this official. Move in with me? I'll do the dishes." I laughed. He watched me nervously. I pulled him into a kiss and whispered, "Yes." Our apartment became ours in a matter of days. His sneakers by the door, my books scattered across the shelves, his hoodies hanging next to my jackets, the smell of his cologne mixing with my laundry detergent, the space filled with the quiet rhythm of shared routines, brushing teeth side by side, fighting over the last clean mug, watching shows half asleep on the couch, wrapped up in each other like it was the only thing that made sense. And sometimes, late at night, he'd roll over, half asleep, and wrap an arm around my waist, murmuring, "Still not a joke." "I know," I'd whisper back. "We never did make some public announcement. There wasn't a need. People figured it out. And the ones who mattered didn't care." Mason had a harder time with that at first, afraid of what people would think, of how they'd define him now. But over time, the fear faded. What we had mattered more than labels. Once, on a quiet Sunday morning, we were walking back from the farmer's market, canvas bags heavy with vegetables and bread, when he stopped and looked at me. "You ever think about how it started?" "All the time." "I was such a dumbass," he said. "True," I smirked, "but a lovable one." He laughed and slipped his fingers between mine. We kept walking, past shops and dogs and people who didn't know us but maybe saw us. 2 guys holding hands, not making a statement, just existing. I thought back to that night on the rooftop, the way his voice had shaken, the fear in his eyes, the hesitation. And now? Now he kissed me in the checkout line at the grocery store. Now he left little notes on the fridge before work. Now he whispered, "I love you," against my neck when we curled up together on the couch after another long week. And every time, without fail, I'd whisper it back. Because this thing between us, whatever we wanted to call it, wasn't a joke. It never was. It was the most honest thing either of us had ever done. And we were still just getting started.